What if you could silence the noise of the world and access inner bliss? What if you knew the shining formulas for overcoming the enormous challenges that every soul faces? Welcome everyone, I'm Shakti Durga. Mystery School podcast, Ancient Wisdom for Everyday Life, will explore the ancient wisdom of the East and West, sharing stories and music, channeling light beings, scanning the unseen world, learning useful spiritual tools, and bringing forth peace, love, purpose, and abundance. In Mystery School, we co-create and share sacred frequencies, sending ripples of love that empower new possibilities to ignite our spirits, overcome obstacles, manifest our most inspired life, a life where your challenges become doorways to your deepest truth, where you anchor yourself in clarity and presence, not from your pain, but from the doors it opens into the deepest wisdom that's already within you. Your path has already begun. It's right beneath your feet. Let's illuminate that path together. Hello. Welcome to Mystery School. I'm Shakti Durga. Today, I'm talking to you about a subject that really, I guess, is at the heart of any spiritual tradition, and that is the age-long fight between the higher soul and the ego, and how that plays out in the various mythologies that have been handed down through the generations to assist us in our spiritual journey. Mythologies are referring to events that happen not so much in the physical world as in the spiritual world, but at the same time, there's echoes of whatever the mythology is about that affect us very much in the physical world. I think it would have been a better design really for humanity if there'd been a clear dividing line between when am I coming from a surrendered place and when am I coming from my ego? Because let's face it, a lot of the time we don't even know. And we think we're coming from surrender, the divine's asked me to do this thing, but before you know it, almost anything gets usurped by our egos that want to be the owner, that want to be the one who gets the recognition, that want to be the one who's special in some way. And that is something that, we've all got to be aware of on a spiritual path. So we want to be instruments of the divine, but there's a sense in which very often the ego wants to become the divine and wants the divine to be at its beck and call, so that the ego is the master instead of the ego being the servant. So there's some great mythologies around this. The stories of Archangel Michael, for instance, with his foot on the neck of a demon and with his knife ready saying, don't you. And really, that's one version. Another version, which I love very much, is the stories from the Vedas, from the Puranas, and from those wondrous treasuries of spiritual insight that were written by great seers in the past who were able to tune into the rhythms of the cosmos, and through the vibrations that they felt, they were able to bring meaning into those vibrations and deliver exalted discourses which were handed down generation after generation as something that was heard. And it wasn't until a long time later it was written down and codified. Be that as it may, some of the stories that I want to refer to have a relevance to us right now because we're coming up to the sacred time of Navaratri, which is an annual festival. In fact, it's held at different times in the year, but the main one is in September or October, depending upon the moon cycle and the moon calendar. So this year in 2025, the cycle of Navaratri is from the 21st of September, and the day of celebration of dark being overcome by the forces of light happens on the 1st of October. So I thought maybe, given that this is a celebration of Ma Durga, we should know a little bit about what does Durga mean. Durga is a goddess that is basically the amalgam of the spiritual energy or Shakti of all 330 million gods. And there was a time of great need in ancient primordial history when the forces of darkness were overtaking the world and they were ruling people's minds. They were putting people in fear. Everyone was going into separateness. People weren't able to get on with each other. The weather went crazy. The crops wouldn't yield. all kinds of weird stuff, floods, fires, crazy conditions were prevailing because the consciousness had become so fragmented, and this was affecting everything, including nature. And so the gods thought, what are we going to do? You know, the darkness is everywhere. And so they thought, well, we'll go and see Lord Vishnu. So they went to Lord Vishnu, who was very wise. And they said, Vishnu, what are we going to do? And Vishnu meditated and said, this demon, Mahishasura, who's taken over the universe, has done so because Lord Brahma, the god of creating, has given him a boon. And they said, oh, really? What sort of boon did he get? And Vishnu said, well, he asked for the boon of immortality. And Brahma said, well, no, you can't have that because demons aren't allowed to be immortal. And so he then said, okay, well, how about if I can only be killed by a woman? So remember, this is a long time ago when roles were quite clearly defined between women. We're sort of bringing children into the world and running the household, and the warriors were the men when this story takes place. And so it was like so unlikely that there'd be any woman who would be capable of meeting this giant asura. And so what happened was Brahma said, okay, you can have that because you've been meditating for 1,000 years. And if that's the prayer that you want answered, because of all the prayer, because of all the spiritual fire that's been generated by all of that consistent practice for the last 1,000 years, you can have that you can only be destroyed or defeated by a woman. And so all the gods were then saying to Vishnu, what are we going to do? Because there aren't any women who would be strong enough to defeat this great demon. And Vishnu said, we'll hold a yagam, a sacred fire ceremony, and we'll get the leading priests and we'll make sure the astrology is good for it. And then what we'll do is we'll get all the gods together, the 330 million gods, we'll get them all to come. And then we'll tell them that everybody has to gift some of their own spiritual power, some of their Shakti. It's got to be gifted into this fire, and we'll do all the mantras. It'll take days, but that's okay. And then what we'll do is ask the divine to come forth as a woman who carries all of our Shakti. Oh, great idea, said the gods. So they went and contacted all the gods and said, you have to come. There's this important yagam. You must be there. And so, sure enough, somehow they managed to fit 330 million gods around this yagam fire, which is something we wouldn't be able to do, but the gods are cleverer than we are. So anyway, they're having the yagam and the priests are doing their mantras and everything's kind of humming along. And then Vishnu said, all right, it's time. I want everybody to bless this fire and ask that some of your Shakti be multiplied and given to this fire for the bringing forth of a female who is invincible. And so that's what they did. And lo and behold, out of the fire rose this stunning, stunning woman who had 18 arms and had weapons in all of her hands. And she was smiling at them with a beautiful kind of serene look on her face and with so much love emanating from her that they all fell to the ground in reverence at the sheer beauty and power of this feminine force that they'd just co-created. And so it was that Ma Durga was birthed. And so to understand Durga is to understand that this is really the Holy Spirit. It's the spirit that's been elevated to the level of a god and then gone into oneness with all the other gods and bringing forth Shakti or energy that is coded at that vibration and that is stable at that vibration. So that's what Durga really means. And so Durga then set off to find Mahishasura. So she just walked in the general direction of where she knew Mahishasura was, and then she decided that she would just sit and wait for him. So she saw a low-hanging branch of a tree, and so she just propped herself up there and just sat there whistling quietly to herself, just waiting for one of the generals of Mahishasura to come by and notice her, which of course happened. And of course he was trying to woo her because she was the most beautiful creature in all creation, and he wanted to marry her, and she said, I'm not marrying you. In fact, I'm not marrying any man unless he can defeat me in battle. And he went, oh, ho, 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 you little thing, you don't really mean that. She said, well, actually, yes, I do. And he said, oh, well, you're just such an extraordinary being that actually the person you should marry is my king, Mahishasura, the great ego, or the great asura. And she said, well, if he can defeat me, I'll consider it. And so the general went post haste to go and get his teacher and bring him back, his really his guru, his king, the person that he followed into battle. And so in came Mahishasura, all swagger, and I'm the best, I'm the greatest. Who is this? Who is this woman who would even deign to say something as arrogant as that she could possibly defeat me in battle? And because he'd never been defeated. And so, of course, the moment he saw Durga, he was so lost in the rapture of the beauty of the divine presence of the feminine divine that he kind of lost all sensibility. And she said, well, you're not touching me until you defeat me in battle. And he said, well, I don't really want to hurt you. And she said, oh, don't worry, you won't. And so he kind of sort of went to push her a little bit. And she went, slam. And then he realized that she meant what she was saying. And then he realized the boon that he got from Brahma. And then he started putting two and two together. And he started to go pale. Anyway, one thing led to another, and they fought for 1,000 days and 1,000 nights. And it was uphill, down dale. The earth shook. All of nature was in hiding because of the terrible extent of this awful war. And in the end, of course, Ma Durga was victorious, and she defeated this demon, even though he tried to hide inside a buffalo. And so she'd had to slay the buffalo, and he came out, and then she slayed the demon, and that was the end of Mahishasura. So you might think, well, why is there an annual celebration that is one of the biggest ceremonies in India each year for that story? Well, the reason is this story is the story of us on our journey of evolution, that we're just like Mahishasura. We fight the divine. We want sovereignty. We want to be the one who's in charge, the important one, the one who gets to make all the decisions and be in control and never take risks and, the stuff that egos are made out of. And so even when you dress it up a lot, even when the ego becomes quite refined, as in many of the asuras, they were quite refined beings. They were architects and they were city planners and they were, they did all sorts of amazing worldly things. But if you disagreed with them, they'd chop your head off. So they weren't interested in you. They were interested in building their own edifices. They were interested in being remembered as being a great being. And they certainly were not interested in any kind of dissension, and they were only interested in being in control of everything. So we're on the journey of surrendering the Mahishasura within us, which manifests as our separateness consciousness. And the great journey of life, the great journey that the alchemists knew about, that the priestesses of Avalon know about, that most of the indigenous folks of the world know about, and which is really in some motive or other present in all of the great traditions of the world, is the overcoming of who we thought we were to become one with the infinite. And that's a journey that gets a big kick along for anybody who tunes into Navaratri. And the way in which the Divine Mother comes to those who are sincere in wanting help, in setting themselves free from all of the karmas and the commutations and permutations of all the things that happen in our lives where we get enmeshed. And if you'd like to have the blessings of the goddess and to be able to overcome the things that have been troubling for you, be it health issues or any kind of issues that you might be having, the way forward from a divine perspective is the expansion of your consciousness. It's not bringing healing into who you think you are right now. It's letting go of who you think you are right now and coming face to face with who you could be if you just let go and let God, as they say. So as you go through this internal metamorphosis of this awakening of the Shakti rising, like the sap rising in nature, in trees and plants, as that happens, then you start to think differently. You start to have different motivations. You start to become very different. And this is something that I've found has been so powerful during every Navaratri that I've celebrated, which has been all of them, going back for the last, 15 or so years. And every time I finish Navaratri feeling like that I'm a different person to who I was going into Navaratri. And there's stories, there's music, there's meditations, there's all kinds of good stuff. If you'd like to tune in with us this Navaratri, you're very welcome. Have a look on our websites and have a look at the information. It's a festival, so you can come to as much or as little of it as you like, and be prepared for your life to change. Be prepared that you are going to become more closely aligned with your highest vision of yourself and of your highest potential. So the ways of the divine are miraculous indeed. And if you're listening to this, I would suggest you've been invited to Navaratri. It's offered by donation. It's just from your heart. Whatever you would like to give is fine. And I hope that you'll be able to partake of at least some of the cosmic feast that's coming up. So hopefully I'll see you there. And you take care of yourself, and just be aware of these dates between the 21st of September and the 1st of October as being a highly charged time for spiritual growth and evolution. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me for Mystery School, Ancient Wisdom for Everyday Life. Be the detective of your spirit and soul and seek the doorways to a new reality. Take one insight from today and let it illuminate your path. Visit shantimission.org to learn more about our other programs, meditations and resources for living with ease and grace, and sign up for our free Soulful Relationships Masterclass. In this class, we'll cleanse and purify the relationship energy in a key relationship in your life. Previous students have experienced rapid transformation in their marriages, in their relationships, with family, work colleagues, teenagers, just from this one practice. And you'll have a spiritual key to successful relationships that you can use again and again. Sign up for the free masterclass at shantimission.org. And we'll be back at 3 p.m. Pacific time every first and third Monday for Mystery School. Mark it in your calendar. We'll see you next time.